So let's generate our motivation. And remember that having love and compassion doesn't mean that we have an idea about the way other people should be and how they should live their lives. So love and compassion are not about molding other people into what we want them to be. And that sometimes is hard because we look at them and we see so much potential, and we have our ideas about what a fantastic person should be like, and we want that person to be that. But maybe they don't want to be that. Maybe that's not the way they find happiness. Maybe that's not what they're interested in. Their version of happiness is different than ours. Or I should say, what makes them happy is different than what makes us happy. So love and compassion involve a lot of self-acceptance, but also a lot of acceptance of other people. And to see the goodness in them, even though they don't fit what we think is the perfect version of a fantastic person. So let's try and stay focused on their kindness to us, on their misery in samsara, and therefore having the mind that wants them to be free of that dukkha, and to have all the various levels of happiness. And remember that that is love and compassion. And so with that kind of attitude, really wishing others well, and wishing for ourselves to attain Buddhahood so we can bring that about, then let's listen to the teachings. So I think that one way or another, we've all had the experience of knowing that our parents would have liked it if we were different, that we didn't fit the image of the kind of children they wanted to have, And they had their image of that kind of child because of their own experiences. So what they missed out on, they want us to have. Harsh things they experience, they don't want us to have. And they, as Lama would say, they means well, dear. But we had different ideas about, what we wanted to do, what made us happy, how to use our potential. And it doesn't mean that our parents were wrong and we were right, or that they were right and we were wrong. We don't need to put those kind of labels in that. We just need to realize that people are different. They want different things. Some people like rice and some people like noodles, and some people don't like either of them, And, it's easy sometimes to confuse love and compassion with, I know what's good for you and how you should be. Yeah? If you only got yourself together in this aspect and thought like I did and believed like I did and had the interests that I have, then you would really, then your life would be wonderful and you'd be happy. But then actually what we're doing is kind of becoming like our parents. We means well to the other people, but we're not giving them much space to be who they are. Yeah, we want to shape them like having clay, and I think you should believe like this, and I think you should do like this, and I think you should have like this. Yeah. But that's very different than actually having love and compassion. Love is just wanting them to be happy, all the different levels of happiness, especially the kind that come from the Dharma. But they may not like Tibetan Buddhism. They may like another kind of Buddhism. They may like another teacher. They may even like another religion and find it more helpful. How can I let them do that when I know this is the best? Okay? Then you become like the people I sit next to on flights who are telling me how, out of compassion, so that I don't go to the hell, they want me to adopt their religion. Yeah? So love is just wanting them to have happiness and its causes. They have different karma, different ways of thinking, different needs, suffering for them to be free of its causes. Yeah, and so to try and have that kind of acceptance of other people without putting our agenda on them. It's not easy. Yeah, because after all, we can see their faults very clearly, and we know the right way that they should be. Don't we? Don't we? Yeah. And if they only would follow our advice. And they don't. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So, so just to kind of remember that and really accept the differences in mentality in people and learn to appreciate them for who they are. Even they're from a different political philosophy, a different political party. Yeah, they vote the opposite that you vote. No, it doesn't matter. We need to be able to connect with people on the heart level. We're still in chapter 6. Okay. We're in this section now, correctly understanding the point. So we talked before about exaggerated statements and treasure teachings and pure vision teachings and, how those are tested. Yeah. And and how the Buddha really encourages us to think about things quite deeply, but also not to think about them so deeply that we can't act. Yeah, because I think there's a part coming up about this, about how we so much want our questions answered that sometimes we don't do any practice because we're stuck on a question. Yeah. Okay, so let's do correctly understanding the point. So this section also came from questions that I collected from people and also from myself, because I had heard enough teachings with the stories, in the Tibetan texts or sometimes in the Indian texts, and not understanding the purpose of the stories, or looking aghast at the story, or and so really asking His Holiness how to understand these kinds of things. So as always, he was very, very practical. So the meaning of certain stories found in Dharma text is not always obvious, especially since they were told for a specific purpose and are related to the author's cultural context. A few examples will illustrate these. So he's going to give some examples. But let me tell you first, one of the stories that I've heard that, because I've been to so many public teachings, and sometimes His Holiness will tell a story and the Tibetans will be very serious and us Westerners will be giggling, and other times we'll be very serious and they'll be laughing hysterically, and we're going, what in the world are they laughing at? So there's this one story from the Lamrim, and it comes in the section about the 8 worldly dharmas. Okay. So there was, there's 2 stories in that section. So there was this man who, he wasn't married, but he was at home one night and he started thinking, it would be so nice I get married, and then it would be so nice I have a child, and I want a son, of course, a son, and I want a son, and what am I going to name my son? And he's thinking and thinking, trying this name and trying that name, and finally he came up with the perfect name. I think it was Dawa something, and he got so excited, I'm going to have a son, and he's going to grow up and be big and strong, and his name is going to be Dawa. And he got so excited and so happy that he grabbed a stick and was dancing around in his room, just out over the moon at this idea of having his son. And he was waving the stick and he hit the bag of sampa that was hung on the ceiling, and it broke the rope, and the bag of sampa fell on his head and killed him. And this was a story about the uselessness of the 8 worldly concerns. Yeah? So somehow, I don't know, I didn't really, that story didn't grab me too much, but I remembered it. It's interesting, you remember the things that don't grab you. The other one, that this was, I think, about precious, what was it? I'll tell you the story and then we can figure out what it was about. But a guy, I think it was about the preciousness of a human life, but a guy who was walking along a cliff and accidentally slipped and fell over the cliff and fell down and landed exactly on top of a yak, facing backwards as the yak was tearing across the field. And he was, again, exuberant. How fortunate I am to ride bareback on a yak facing backwards. How often does this happen? It's like a precious human life. Yeah? Do you remember those stories? Yeah? So, yeah. So there were those kind of stories. And I was always, how are we supposed to take these? Yeah. So I'm going to read some more that, His Holiness discussed, and you'll see. And do you remember also when we were studying the 400 with Geshe Topke, and the first 8 chapters had these little stories? Yeah, I think I understood 1 or 2 of them, and it was the 3rd time I had studied that text. Yeah, did you understand the stories? I remember one of the stories, this one I understood about, there was the, maybe you remember this one, the second wife of a lord, a very rich man. She was the second wife. And one night she heard noise in the kitchen, and she thought it was a mouse, but when she went there, it was, a young woman. She couldn't see very well, it was dark. And she thought it was the first wife's daughter. And she was like furious. You're going in the kitchen in the middle of the night to get a snack. How dare you take the food from that family? And then she looked again and she noticed it was her daughter. And then she said, "Oh, my pet, please have more food. Enjoy yourself." So I think this was a story about, partiality. Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? How much do we jive with those stories? Yeah, a few of them that one I understood. I was, because when I hear stories, I try to imagine them, And so the guy, dancing in his room with the stick and hitting the back, the thing of Tsampa, and it falling on his head and killing him, and and NYPD coming with an ambulance. Okay. So there is the story of the Buddha in his previous life giving away his wife and children as an act of generosity. Do you remember that story? Yeah, of course we remember it. Why do we remember that story? We were horrified, weren't we? Okay, so here is our teacher telling us this story about the incredible, amazing generosity of a bodhisattva, and we're horrified. Yeah, okay, because this seems to contradict not only modern values of gender equality, like the wife is his possession and he can give her away, but also the ancient principle of caring for one's family. Okay, so we may be confused or even incensed by the values and assumptions underlying such a story. I remember one time listening to this story. Oh, we got so mad. The whole room, it was a room full of Westerners. We were so mad hearing this story. Geshe-la, she's not public property. How can he give her away? How can he give the children away? The person who asked for them was a yaksha, a yaksha, some kind of demon, and he's giving his wife and kids away to this demon in the middle of the forest. That's totally irresponsible. How can you say this is a great act of generosity? He should be protecting them from the demon. And actually, he should realize that his wife is able to protect herself and that he's, doesn't have to kind of hoover over her. Hover. Hoover's the vacuum cleaner. Yeah, he doesn't have to hoover over. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we were so upset with this story. And poor Geshe Tekchok, actually, I wrote about this. I put this whole thing in the Precious Garland book, and how Geshe-la really, well, it's coming here a little bit, okay? So it is helpful to step back and ask ourselves what Dharma meaning is being expressed in the story, because it seems like the meaning is patriarchy and women are the possessions of men and men can do what they want. And, that seems to be the theme, but that's not the theme. Okay, what's the theme? Most people cherish their family more than anything else. Attachment to our loved ones is often so strong that the thought of being separated from them brings us great anguish. That someone was willing to offer what they cherish the most testifies to the depth of that person's faith and veneration for the three jewels. Okay? So he's willing to separate from his most cherished objects to create merit, to show respect for the three jewels. That meaning totally went by us. Totally went by us, We didn't see that at all. Okay? This story also illustrates that when attachment has been conquered, the mind does not even cling to those whom we cherish the most. The mind is so free that we are not overwhelmed with distress when separated from our dear ones. That's the purpose of the story. Yeah. We, as a group of Westerners, completely missed it. Yeah. How totally generous the Bodhisattva was, giving up the objects of his greatest attachment. Or what, other people see as their greatest attachment. So we don't need to agree with the social values of an ancient culture in order to learn a valuable point from an ancient story. While in ancient times, and to some extent even today, a wife and children being a man's property was acceptable to Indian sensibilities, clearly it is not acceptable now in other countries, although in some countries it is still acceptable. Okay. We can maintain our contemporary social values and still appreciate the Dharma meaning of a story. So that's the point. Yeah, we hold our values, we look for what the actual meaning of the story is. That doesn't mean that it becomes a story we tell when we explain the Dharma to other people. We try and think of stories that, are, relate to our culture more, okay? Ashvaghosha, here's another one. Ashvaghosha, a great Indian sage of the 1st century, wrote the Acts of the Buddha Karita, Buddha Karita, in which he related the Buddha's deeds when he was a bodhisattva. One of these was the well-known story about the Buddha offering his body to a starving tigress so she could feed her cubs. Has everybody heard that story? Yeah? He was a prince and he went into the forest and he wanted to do an act of generosity, and he saw a mother tiger who was starving with a bunch of baby tigers. They're called cubs. Cubs, not kittens. No? Baby tigers? Okay, and they were starving too, and the Bodhisattva prince had so much compassion that he decided to give his body to the mother tigress so that she could be nourished, and then her milk would nourish the baby cubs. And so he just laid down and let her eat him. Okay, so we, hear that story. And again, we go, you mean you're telling me to practice the Dharma? I have to find a tigress and, get eaten? And that's how I practice the Dharma? Yeah. So again, the story, we don't understand it correctly, okay? So the Buddha in his previous life, so when he encountered a starving tigress one day, in a pure act of generosity, not expecting anything in return, he gave the tigress his body. Yeah. So that's the thing to look at. The thing that we cherish the most, our own body, he gave to this tigress, and he didn't expect anything in return, because certainly the tigress wasn't going to say, oh, thank you, you're so generous. And the tigress was not going to put a plaque up and say, this bodhisattva, is practicing so well and gave me his body. And the tigress wasn't going to talk to a newspaper reporter and recount the story so that it got written up and the bodhisattva got a good reputation, okay? So he wasn't expecting any of this, And that's what it's talking about. And then, to use it as a thing of when I give something to somebody, can I really give it without any sense of wanting something back? So I don't know about you, but I can do that if it's something that I don't want. I can give it very easily, very freely. I don't expect it back. In fact, I'm glad the other person is taking it because I don't want it. But if it's something that I cherish, that I like, that I think is pretty, or that I want, can I give it to somebody else with no attachment to the object and no expectation that that person's going to go, oh, thank you so much. This is so beautiful. You are so generous and kind for giving me this wonderful object. Thank you so much. Can I really give it without wanting any of that? Yeah. Or without the thought that, oh, this person will think I'm so generous, and then they'll go and tell these other people about how kind and generous I am. Okay. So, when you hear this story, for me anyway, it makes me think, what would it feel like to give like that? And can I give like that? And how can I practice giving like that? But it took me a while to get to that point where that became the meaning of the story for me. Okay. Yeah. Because my first, time of hearing the story, it was like, huh? Yeah, I mean, he gave his body to a tigress. Why didn't he go back, get some tiger food, bring it back, feed the tiger with that? It would have been a lot better if he had lived and he had done something useful with his life. And besides, the tiger, I'm sure, would have liked tiger food better than his body, me, the practical one. Okay? Huh?
That is tiger food.
Not in my mind. Tiger food comes in a can. Okay.
Tiger chapter.
Yeah. Okay. Because I have my whole ideas about, what you give to whom, when, and what kind of condition. And I don't like to give things that are not going to be used properly. Yeah. Or wasting the things, Okay, so let's get back to what His Holiness said here. Okay, so he gave his body to the tigress without expecting anything. The moment he did this, this was Ashvaghosha. Because he had a strong feeling to practice as the Buddha had. So the moment he did this, he composed a prayer of 70 verses about the Bodhisattva practice, using his own blood as ink. This prayer is really wonderful, but it seems that no one was there when he did this. So I'm not sure where the oral transmission of the prayer came from.
If you wrote it down, it wouldn't be oral.
No, but you have to read the text. That's what the oral transmission is, when you read the text. Okay. So some people may initially be horrified by the idea of feeding their body to a tiger and wonder why Buddhists would glorify such a suicidal act. Yeah. Isn't it better to stay alive and work for the welfare of human beings rather than feed our body to an animal, they ask? Okay, so this was my question. The purpose of this story is to emphasize the depth of a bodhisattva's compassion. They are willing to give even their body and life without any attachment to benefit others. Okay, so the story is about illustrating that the depth of compassion. The story is not about being practical when you practice generosity. Okay, but I'm always practical. It's like, I'm not going to give something if it's just going to, get wasted. This illustrates the strength of compassion we want to cultivate as aspiring bodhisattvas. Although having no attachment to our body may seem almost impossible at our current level, by training our mind in non-attachment and compassion, we will gradually be able to cultivate the attitude that can give our body and life as easily as giving an apple to someone. Wouldn't that be nice to have that little attachment to our body, that it would be like giving an apple? Yeah. But when we hear this, it sounds ridiculous. Give them the apple, keep your body. Okay, but that's not the point, okay? So this whole section is about getting the right point. In another story, this is another one, yeah? A non-believer asked Aryadeva for one of his eyes, and Aryadeva happily offered it to him. The person then crushed the eye. Okay, so me, the practical one, why did you give your eye to some idiot who doesn't appreciate it? It's much better you keep your eye and you work for sentient beings with your eye and, be more judicious with how you practice generosity. Yeah. So we may wonder, does the generosity demonstrated by this holy being mean I should give away everything indiscriminately, even to someone who doesn't value the gift? That's the question my mind comes with. Yeah, why should I give them something if they don't value it? Yeah. Oh, I remember one time. So you know about my time in Italy, okay? So, so one time, where were we? We weren't at the center, we were somewhere else, and Circum Rinpoche was teaching, and Alex or someone had given me a postcard of Rinpoche riding a yak in... it must have been in the Spiti Lahul area, okay? And it was this beautiful photograph of my teacher, riding on a yak. And I love the photo, okay? So did one of the Italian, he wasn't even a monk at that time, yeah? One of the Italian men. But the photo had been given to me. But I was really trying hard to practice thought training and generosity. And, you shouldn't hate the people who look down on you, and you should be nice to them, and you should be kind to them. And, it would make him really happy, and I really should give this away. If I don't give it away, I'm just a total miser and a failure as a Dharma practitioner. So I've got to give this, this postcard away. And so, it was kind of the way I was with my cashmere sweater, the internal civil war. So I finally decided that I was going to give him the picture of Sergam Rinpoche and the yak. And I gave it to him, and he was happy. Yeah. He didn't gush over it. He didn't gush over me. It didn't change our relationship. I got nothing out of it for value for my ego. I don't have that precious picture from a chant of yak back. Yeah. So these are the trials and tribulations of a nun. As my mother would say, this should be your biggest problem. She's right. Even though I don't like to hear that. Okay. Have you ever had that happen to you?
Okay, so in my previous job, there was this whole family I knew, and they had a differently abled son who was an adult. And I saw him as a patient a few times because he was on his bike and he got in a bike accident and it really mashed his leg and had to relearn how to walk. Mm-hmm. And so he wouldn't listen to his parents at that point because he was acting like a teenager, although he was much older. I got him not to ride his bike, but I had to see him for months and months and months because he had to relearn how to walk. And he was a big sports fan. So I knew the guy who was the trainer at the Mariners, the pro team, and I had him, got a baseball, and I was going to have him sign it for Bruce. Mm-hmm. And I go to see the trainer, and he's like, this baseball is no good. And he has this locked drawer with all these signed baseballs from all these famous baseball players. So he gives me a baseball that's got all the players' signatures on it. It's a really cool thing, I guess. And I asked him to sign it, and he said, oh, no, it will ruin the baseball. So I said, well, sign the other baseball in. So the one I brought, So I bring him back to Bruce, and and everybody at work is totally excited because we have this Mariner signed baseball. And Bruce, he just looks at it and he's just like, I could have handed him a Kleenex. He was so nonplussed. He was like, and he was such a great sports fan, and we were all excited about it. And he was just like, nothing.
Yeah.
It was really a good lesson.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot, actually. So some background to the story is needed. Yeah, you have a background about Aryadeva. At that time, non-Buddhist scholars were challenging the Buddhist views, and a big debate was about to occur to determine whose views were correct. And that was very important because whoever won the debate, the other people would convert to become their followers, okay? So Aryadeva was to represent the Buddhist view, and in order to train him, his spiritual mentor, Nagarjuna, took the position of the non-Buddhists and debated with Aryadeva. Nagarjuna did this so well that Aryadeva began to think, my teacher is not actually a Buddhist, and disparaged Nagarjuna during the debate practice. This disrespect towards his spiritual mentor was a destructive act, but because Aryadeva had high realizations, the karmic seed of reviling his spiritual mentor master did not fester in his mind stream, but ripened quickly. So very often, if it's a very heavy karma, it ripens in this life. If it's not so heavy, it ripens in future lives. Okay, so this was a heavy one. It was going to ripen quickly. Yeah. So in an act, en route to the debate site, he encountered someone who asked for one of his eyes. Seems like in India, you know. Hi, nice to meet you. Which way do I turn to go to Delhi? And by the way, can I have an eye? I don't know. Anyway, so somebody asked for one of his eyes. In an act of consummate generosity, with no expectation of receiving anything in return, Aryadeva happily complied and continued on his journey. However, as he was walking away, he looked back and he saw the person crushing his eye, and he regretted his generosity. For that reason, his sight was not restored, whereas otherwise it would have been. So the point there is, don't regret your generosity. So I'm so glad he has that picture of Sarkam Rinpoche on the yak. I hope he still has it and looks at it and is happy. So there are many lessons in this story. The importance of always maintaining a respectful attitude towards our spiritual mentor, the possibility of compassionately giving away our body with no expectation of return, and the disadvantage of regretting an act of generosity. There's a lot to see in that story. But from this story, we should not draw the conclusion that we must sacrifice our body or material resources indiscriminately without making sure that they will be properly utilized. Okay? Yeah, because it initially seems like that, but it's only said, no, we shouldn't draw that conclusion. You just give without thinking. The perfection of generosity entails giving an appropriate object to a suitable person at the right time. Okay, good judgment is indispensable. Giving a bottle of liquor to an alcoholic is not an act of generosity. In his text, Bodhisattva Grounds, or Bodhisattva Bhumi, Asanga gives a detailed explanation about the practice of generosity, describing appropriate and inappropriate times, objects, recipients, places, and motivations for giving. Yeah. So it isn't just you give indiscriminately. Yeah, you have to really think about it, what you're giving, when, who the person is, what is the context, and so on. From another perspective, Nagarjuna and Aryadeva were highly realized Arya Bodhisattvas. Thus, this story seems odd, for it appears to ignore Aryadeva's mastery. Surely someone with his realizations would never have behaved like that towards his spiritual mentor, nor would he have given one of his eyes to someone for whom it was of no benefit. Similarly, he would not have regretted his generosity afterwards. Because this story makes Aryadeva appear imprudent? Okay. I question whether these events should be taken literally. Okay, now here's another story I'm sure you've heard about the old lady and the dog tooth. So there's the story of an old woman whose son was making a pilgrimage to a holy site. She asked him to please bring a relic of the Buddha back for her. He remembered this only on his way home, and not wanting to disappoint his mother, he took a tooth from the carcass of a dead dog he found along the way and presented that tooth of the dead dog to his mother, saying it was the Buddha's relic. So he completely lied to his mother. Yeah, And he gave her something, to pull the wool over her eyes so he didn't get in trouble. Okay. But she, from her side, had great faith and worshipped this tooth devotedly, thinking it was the Buddha's tooth. And so she thought so much about the Buddha and the Buddha's qualities and so on. As a result, the tooth produced many relics and she experienced miraculous occurrences. Because they say from parts of the Buddha body, or from very holy objects, that relics will manifest little, balls and things like that will come out of it. And that's what happened with the tooth, because of her faith and devotion. So it is easy to conclude from this story that blind faith is necessary on the path, and that you should just, grab a dog's tooth or a cat's tooth, put it on your altar, worship it, pretending like it's a Buddha's tooth, and you will soon have miraculous occurrences. Okay, that's the idea we get from the story. Yeah. So this is clearly contradictory to the Buddha's emphasis on developing discriminating wisdom. And then His Holiness said, I couldn't believe that. He said, I do not see much point in this story, and propose replacing it with the following more suitable account to illustrate the benefit of having confidence in the three jewels. That was brave. But then I remember hearing him tell this story one other time during, we were in Sarah, and he told the story. But I think he tells it because the audience likes it. It inspires faith in some people in the audience. But he just said, this story is just... Okay. So 2 or 3 centuries ago, a great teacher and sincere practitioner named Togyen Lama Rinpoche lived in Tibet. He had a small clay image, small tsatsa, of Tsongkhapa on his carefully tended altar. One day, due to Togyen Lama's genuine practice and heartfelt aspirational prayers, that image of Tsongkhapa actually spoke and gave teachings to him. This came about not from the side of the statue, but mainly due to Togyen Lama's excellent practice. Due to his spiritual experiences and confidence in Tsongkhapa, this clay image became the real Tsongkhapa and spoke to him. However, for ordinary people who lack that kind of spiritual experience and faith, the statue looks just like clay. So that's the story His Holiness would propose, talking. When I was in Tibet, we went one place, I forget the name of it, but there was an image of the reclining Chenrezig, and apparently that would talk to people sometimes and give them teachings. Didn't talk to me. So these are just a few examples. When we read stories and texts, it is helpful to reflect on them in order to discern the meaning the author intended. We could ignore the social values or other elements of the story that don't make sense to people in our day and age or in our culture. It is also good to remember that not all aspects of an analogy apply to the point being established. And that's really important. Often just regular analogies you hear in teachings, you have to pick out the part of the analogy that is illustrating what the teacher wants to illustrate. It's not the whole analogy. Yeah. And because sometimes you look and you take the whole analogy and you apply it, and then it you can't figure it out. Many stories or analogies are useful in one area, but cannot be generalized to all situations. When doubts remain, it is helpful to discuss the meaning with Dharma friends or ask our teachers so that we will understand teachings, stories, and analogies in the way that they are intended. Okay? And so here for your reflection, you recall a story that you've heard or read in a Dharma teaching that left you feeling confused, disturbed, or irritated. Can you think of one?
I think when we were at the Lamrim teachings, we were discussing the story of the fly that's on the turd that gets swept around the stupa. And it's being told to prove the power of the holy object, right, which seems so, again, contrary to the idea of you need intention and all that for your karma to ripen in a future life. Right. At the same time, I guess it's encouraging us to do practices like circumambulation, or I don't know, it can be read both ways. But that story I find difficult.
Okay, people have heard that story, about the old monk who, at the time of the Buddha, who wanted to ordain, and Shariputra, with his magical powers, couldn't see that this old man, he wasn't a monk yet, had enough merit to ordain. And so the man was crying and crying outside the temple. And then the Buddha came and asked him what was happening, and he told the story. And then the Buddha looked with his powers and saw that one time in a previous life, this man was a fly. There was some cow dung floating around a stupa on the water, and the fly landed on it, and then that way floated around the stupa and accumulated a merit. And that merit was what pushed him over the finish line of merit required to be able to ordain. Okay? There's also a similar story where the Buddha, I don't know, but a similar story with somebody wanting, well, I won't tell that one. Let's focus on this one. Okay, so there's the story. That's point one. 2, realizing that the story is from another culture that had different social values than you do now. Set the details of the story aside and ask yourself, what is the point of this story? So what was the point of that story?
Well, I think it confirms one of the characteristics, one of the results of karma, that if you have a small virtuous action as a sentient being, that it can expand, that it's expandable, that karma is expandable.
Yeah.
And can ripen in a much bigger effect.
Right, that karma is expandable. So a small cause can create a big result. Okay, that's not what she thought. She thought, why does going around a stupa on a piece of cow dung create merit? That's a reasonable thought to have, isn't it?
I like to think that probably I have many more countless eons of being flies and squirrels, and so I have to go for the small points that might happen.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then 3, consider how that point relates to your Dharma practice, which is what you just did. Yeah. Okay. What?
I find it comforting,
Oh,
that story.
oh, you find it comfort. Why do you find it comforting?
I haven't had this thought in a while, but when I used to cop to discouragement quite easily, and so to think that even the merit of this fly helped this old man who was very old, I think, because I recall the story, like really old, over 100 something, to get ordained. That I could reassure myself that surely I too have made merit. Maybe as a fly, but maybe in other ways too. I'm not 100. I wasn't 100 when I ordained. I don't know, I found it comforting.
Okay, but it does bring up that whole question about creating merit by the power of the holy object, and how in the Lam Rim there's a statement about that's the only merit that will undoubtedly lead, or undoubtedly or directly lead to, to liberation or enlightenment. And you read that, and you go, what? But I was taught that it's all about motivation and, all these factors and how you create the action and the object and the agent. And now this, and trying so hard to generate bodhicitta and then dedicating your merit with an awareness of emptiness. And now they say that all of that is just merit that brings samsara, and the only merit that directly results in enlightenment is this kind of stuff, like floating around the statue on a piece of cow dung. Yeah. Did you remember we were at, were you there? It was at which teaching? We went to see Geshe Topke. Yeah. And because we had asked Geshe Dadul about it, and he didn't explain it. And we asked Geshe Topke, and then I asked Geshe Nawang Samten, who's the chancellor of Central University of Tibetan Studies. It was very interesting and created quite a discussion topic for a while. I'm not sure I got 100% clarity on it, but certainly thinking about it was very helpful. But the conclusion was, Geshe Dada was emphasizing that kind of merit doesn't happen very often. Yeah, the merit. It's by the power of the object, because the object has been blessed by the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. So the object has some kind of energy or power in it. And, how they say that even you get mad at a bodhisattva, it creates all this negative karma, but it also creates a karmic link with the bodhisattva for you to get enlightened. And so, that any kind of contact with holy objects is, in the end, beneficial. But when he said that it's very rare to create it, I thought, but, I have holy objects all around and, create this a lot. And then it made me really think, but, compared to all the other human beings and compared to all the living creatures on this planet, it's actually quite rare to be in a place where you have holy objects all around you. It is quite rare. So it's like, okay, take advantage of that. But I also find that I have, how to say, people are oriented in really different ways, and I'm oriented towards, like, let's study something and think about it and discuss it. And other people are oriented of, there's a holy object, let's make offerings and bow and so on. Okay? So people are different. Yeah? I'll leave it at that. Okay, now, next section. It's called, Can the Dharma Change? Some people ask if the Buddha's teachings can be changed in order to make them more relevant to our historical period. While they want to make the Dharma more understandable to others, these people are concerned that altering the teachings would impact their authenticity and efficacy. This question requires much careful thought. It's important to differentiate between the essence of the Buddhist teachings, such as the determination to be free, bodhicitta, the correct view of reality, and the external forms of Buddhism, such as the color and style of monastic robes, the design of the altar, the types of offerings that are made, and the language and melody of chants. Okay, external forms have changed each time Buddhism has spread to a different place, and this does not affect the essence of the Buddha's message. Okay, so this is important, and you see that, I mean, even the way of prostrating all that each tradition has its own way of prostrating. And I remember being taught that when you bow, you shouldn't have your hands far apart because this creates karma for you to be born as a duck. And when you prostrate, you shouldn't have your hands like this because this creates karma for you to be born as a cow. And, when you set up your water bowls, they should be the distance of a grain of rice, but they don't tell you if it's long grain or short grain rice, and they don't tell you if it's the length of the rice or the width of the rice. So this can vary a lot. But if you keep your bowls too close, you you criticize your teacher because you're too close. If you keep your bowls too far away, then you're separated it creates the karma to be separated from your spiritual mentor, and on and on. And there's one, this wasn't told to me by my teacher, but by a Tibetan friend, that if you get your teacher's shoes, it creates karma to be separated from them. Because, you wear this is a Tibetan thing, not, because it's like saying, go away, here's some shoes, go away. So I guess you don't buy your teacher shoes and you let your teacher walk on the thorns and the rocks and the hot concrete. That's a good way to get your teacher to come back, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so there's all these kinds of things, and how much energy do you put into them? I remember one time at Vajrapani, we were, there was Lama Stupa, and so they would put water bowls, all around Lama Stupa. And apparently Rinpoche had said if a fly lands in the water bowl, don't stick your finger in to rescue the fly because your finger's dirty. Yeah. So there was a fly in. I, of course, went to stick my finger in because I hadn't heard this. And somebody said, oh, no, don't do that. And they went and picked up off the dirty ground a branch from a tree and came back and put it in the bowl to lift the fly out with that. Okay, so there's all these kinds of things. And some people are so meticulous about them. Yeah, incredibly meticulous. And I don't know, I can't get into them very much. Yeah. But, again, different people, what do they say? Different strokes for different folks. Okay. But what His Holiness is saying is all this external stuff is, it changes when you go from one culture to the other. Yeah. And so, yes, to get back to whether you bow like this or like this. And so we ask Geshe-la, and you're always supposed to have your thumbs tucked in. Yeah. You're never supposed to have your palms flat. But the Theravadas and the Chinese always have their palms flat. And that was supposed to be very negative karma. It's going to the Buddha empty-handed. So you always tuck your thumbs in. And I remember asking, Geshe-la about that. And somebody in the class did. And, oh, no, you have to like this. Otherwise, it's negative karma. So you mean that the people who, from the other Buddhist traditions who are bowing like that create negative karma? Yeah. So, these kind of things, what are you going to do? Go tell the other people? Or we have it coming up. Chinese Vesak is on Sunday and Tibetan Vesak is next month. So which is the real Vesak? And, if your merit is multiplied by 10 million, 100 million, excuse me, 100 million, not 10 million, that's too little. So you don't give an offering today, you wait until that day so that you can accumulate the most merit, the 100 million. Yeah, but there's 2 Vesak days, so which do you give it on, the Chinese one or the Tibetan one? Oh, but then you have to give 2 offerings, you know. And you don't really want to give 2 offerings. You just want to give something so you create 100 million times the merit. Yeah, that's the important thing, is the merit math. Not that you have a generous feeling of wanting to give something so that you give it twice.
You don't have 100 million twice?
You what?
You can have 100 million twice?
Well, I don't know, you know. I mean, one of my teachers said, no, it has to be exactly on that day. But he didn't say which time zone.
Work on your faith.
Yeah. So all these kinds of questions come up, don't they? Yeah. Yeah. Like which time zone? Okay, it has to be, you know, well, which one? Which month? Yeah. And then which time zone? Yeah, because have you noticed that tomorrow is Posada for us, but Vesak Day is the day after that? Because when we're have new moon here tomorrow, it'll already be the day after in Asia, which is not new moon, the full moon. So it'll be the full moon for them when we're having the full moon here on the previous day. Yeah, so which is the real day, you know?
Vesak tomorrow?
Chinese Vesak is the day after tomorrow.
In
But
that time zone, but in this time zone, is
Yeah.
it tomorrow?
Well, yeah, but it may not start until we have to look at the full
we have a
moon.
Western visa.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, it's this thing of, you know, how much do we take these things literally? Yeah. And the style of the robes, or what kind of chanting you do. Yeah. Do you do your pujas in Tibetan? Yeah. Or do you do them in English? In some Dharma centers, you do everything in Tibetan, and nobody understands it except the few Tibetans that are there. But everybody else loves it because you're chanting very nice and you get something to eat. Yeah.
Doing the Guru Puja for many years, I became very familiar with the meaning of
Mm-hmm.
the ceremony, even though it was in Tibetan. And to this day, I miss doing it in Tibetan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's because you're used to it. But what about people who just come to the center?
What are they going to get from the English?
Hmm?
What would they get from the English if they're new to the practice?
I think they would get something. Yeah, because at least they're understanding the language. Yeah. Okay, but everybody has their own preference. I miss doing it in Tibetan too, but I don't want to do all my practices in Tibetan, you know, because I see that it's very easy. In certain environments, I can concentrate a lot doing the Tibetan. In other environments, then I space out and I just chant the Tibetan, and then it's, you know, kind of at the end. And gee, did I think much about the puja or not? Yeah, I don't know if you have that problem. I have that problem. Okay. So, what His Holiness is saying here, okay, external forms have changed each time Buddhism has spread to a different place, and this does not affect the essence of the Buddhist message. However, changing the teachings of the Buddha that describe dukkha, its origin, its cessation, and the path to nirvana would alter the fundamental perspective and principles of the Buddha Dharma, making it no longer the teachings of the Buddha. Okay, so what he's saying is you have to discern what is the Buddha's teaching and what is culture. and what is external stuff. Yeah. But I want to come back to that. It's wonderful that you get some meaning out of doing these things in Tibetan. I'm not criticizing that. But I've been in Southeast Asia quite a while, and I see how many people love going to ceremonies where they don't understand one single word. Yeah. Am I telling the truth? Yeah. And they give large donations. They don't understand one word. Some of them have faith in the Buddha. Some of them have the idea of creating merit so that their business will go well. Yeah, people do this for all different sorts of reasons. Yeah. So yes, there's virtue in doing those things, but I wonder, isn't there more virtue in giving a teaching instead of just doing a ceremony that nobody understands? But those people don't come when there's a teaching. They come when there's a ceremony. So what do you do? Yeah. I've been at things where His Holiness has scolded the people for that. You know, when they show up for the initiation, place is so crowded for the initiation, for the teachings, lots of empty seats. Okay, so it's just, I don't know, it just makes me think, yeah. Yeah, yeah. How do you benefit sentient beings? And for sure, for some people, going to pujas and ceremonies and initiations where they don't understand anything, it's better for them to do that than to stay at home. Yeah, and watch the baseball game or gamble or who knows what. It's better that they go to a puja, even if they don't have a good motivation. So you can't knock that. You know, for those people, it's something that benefits them. They create merit for it. But my mind also thinks, is there a way for them to benefit more? Yeah. To have something where they still come, but they gain more benefit because they actually understand something about what the Buddha said. Yeah, so I just wonder, you know. So some teachers are quite skillful. They'll, some of my teachers, you know, you advertise an initiation, and then you spend 2 hours giving the motivation, which is the teaching, you know. Lama Zopa does this. His Holiness does this too. Yeah. And then 15 minutes for the initiation. But that way you get everybody there so that you can teach them. So that's skillful. And I think that's much better than having them come and doing the whole thing where they don't understand anything. Yeah. Okay, so regarding the development of Buddhist thought in ancient India and in the classical period in Tibet, many of the debates in the texts center on issues in epistemology, cognitive processes, and the relationship between body and mind that were important to people at that time and place. In ancient India, Buddhist thinkers had to respond to philosophical claims made by non-Buddhist Indian schools. While some of those debates may, upon first glance, not seem important to us, if we look closely, we may see that some version of those views might exist today. In that case, studying their refutations could help us when speaking with our contemporaries who assert the existence of a universal mind, an absolute creator, predetermination, and so forth. Understanding the reasons disproving the theses of non-Buddhists may also help us dispel similar kinds of beliefs that we ourselves may have. Okay? So His Holiness is saying that some of the debates in the text may not instantly make sense to us. And we may kind of go, well, who would believe that anyway? And he's saying, before you judge, really think about what that view is. And first of all, check if some people in your society hold some version of that view. It may not be the exact same thing, but some version. And also check inside yourself and see if somewhere in your own mind you're holding that kind of view. You know, and so in that way, learning these texts that were written many centuries ago to debate philosophies that are no longer prevalent now might be useful to us because those ideas are still around, you know, and maybe even in our own mind. Okay, so that's all this, you know, is really saying in that previous paragraph. You have to see what is the Dharma and what is culture, and make sure you don't change the Dharma. Okay, because if you do, then the teachings won't lead to liberation. They won't lead to awakening. You may get more people coming. Yeah, your Dharma center may be a bigger success because more people come because you have social activities and you teach all sorts of things that young people like to hear. But are they learning the Dharma and are they progressing on the path? If you do that. So is the purpose to get more people, or is the purpose to keep the purity of the tradition? And so in this way, personally speaking, I think that it's very good that we have a big variety of teachers and of centers and so on, you know, and that some places where they have more social activities, not too many, but a few, you know, more than we do here. We certainly don't have raves and parties and, you know, pull out the guitar and invite the young people to come and make s'mores. But that's old-fashioned anyway. You know, that doing that kind of thing, you know, is good. It gets people there. They hear a little bit of Dharma, put some good imprints on their mind, and maybe later on they'll explore those and they'll learn more. So it's good there are places that do that. But I don't want the Abbey to be one of them. Yeah, because we also need places that do what we're trying to do, which is, you know, really focus on understanding the teachings and putting them into practice and preserving them. So we need everybody's contribution to spread the Dharma in all different sorts of ways. Yeah. But we also have to be clear about what we're doing and what our purpose is. Yeah, and that we're not gonna, we're not gonna, you know, play pop music in the dining room so that all the young people will come and have a party. God, I think most of us would run down the hill, wouldn't we? Yeah, it's the last thing I want in my mind. Well, not the last thing, but close to it. Okay. In Tibet, many of the debates center around the two truths, what they are and how they relate to each other. Here, Buddhists debate with each other, not with non-Buddhists, like they did in ancient India, in order to distinguish the middle way from views of nihilism and absolutism. Some of the views expressed by earlier Tibetan Buddhists are held by people today, so studying the pros and cons of these various views can be relevant to our practice. So again, don't just throw away the commentaries, because they refute views that you may not have heard of before. You know, really look deeply into them. In ancient times, people lacked a sophisticated understanding of the brain and neural processes and of their role in perception, emotions, and other cognitive processes. Who was it? One of my Theravada friends was saying that, he read one text where the function of the brain was to produce mucus, because that's what came out of the nose. So from brain, out of the nose. Okay. Since now we have a much better scientific understanding of the brain and its role in our experiences, it would be helpful to bring that knowledge into Buddhist thinking. Okay, so this is one of His Holiness's really unique contribution. Okay. Buddhist dialogue with science raises a number of other issues that need to be discussed and debated, issues that would not have occurred to people in ancient India or in classical Tibet. Previously, people naturally accepted that mind and body were different entities. These days, they don't. So Buddhists need to prove the existence of the mind, its difference from the brain, and the relation of the two. Yeah, we can't just go into a bunch of scientists and say mind and brain are, two different things and so on. We have to have some way of proving these ideas to these people. The great Buddhist debaters of the past were not concerned with the issue of predetermination and free will. But when Buddhism enters into cultures influenced by theistic religions, these topics become crucial. Yeah, and people raise them. And if the Buddhists have never thought about them, we don't know how to respond to people who raise these kinds of questions. In these and other areas, Buddhists need to learn and contemplate the view of scientists and people of other religions and know how to apply Buddhist principles to them and to respond with wisdom. There is much room for us to grow in these areas. So I remember one time being at a teaching and when somebody in the audience asked the Tibetan Lama about the role of the brain in emotions. And the Lama said, well, there really isn't any role. And then the person said, well, there's different substances that are released in the brain when you have different emotions. And so the Lama said, well, if that were the case, then when you have anger, then your head should swell up because there were those substances released. So, they're taking up room. And then when your anger went away, then your head should deflate a little bit, because he's thinking, big molecules and stuff like that. At which point, the people in the audience laughed. The Lama certainly meant well, but he doesn't know these kinds of things. So this is the kind of stuff that we have to think about and be able to explain to people who come and, learn from us, And just in these days, how we're seeing, too, how you respond to the situation that's happening right now of alleged sexual assault. Different, one culture responds one way, one culture responds another way. I got an email from a Western person today that said, I love Tibetan Buddhism. It's benefited me so much. But after I read a couple of letters, I asked myself, why am I continuing to follow this tradition if this is the response that the people in charge have? Yeah, so it is these kind of things. We really need to think and think how to present things according to our culture in a way that makes sense but does not contradict the basic Dharma principles. Yeah, we can contradict Tibetan culture, but not the basic Dharma principles. And it's not always easy to differentiate those two. And sometimes, especially for our teachers, it's hard to differentiate them because they were never taught to do that kind of analysis. Buddhism and their culture were just completely, they learned both from the time they were little kids, However, with respect to the teachings on afflictions and how they cause suffering, sentient beings today have the same kinds of afflictions as they did thousands of years ago. Okay, so whether people get mad and hit themselves hit each other with a tree branch or drop bombs, the weapons change, but the mind of anger is the same, is what he's saying. Okay, the specific objects of attachment and anger may change in different times. In ancient times, human beings weren't attached to their smartphones and didn't become angry when their computers or cars broke down. However, the general objects of attachment and anger are still very much the same. Whatever gives us happiness or interferes with that happiness. That's what we get attached to, that's what we have anger for. Furthermore, the processes of getting angry by exaggerating the negative aspect of someone and of subduing anger by means of applying counterforces are the same now as before. The antidotes to individual afflictions such as anger and clinging attachment remain as relevant today as they were then. And that certainly is very true. It is feasible that after several 100,000 years, our brain may change through an evolutionary process to the point where even the shape of our head or the functioning of our nervous system will be radically different. In those cases, it is conceivable that sentient beings' preoccupations and ways of thinking may change. However, as far as the problem of self-grasping is concerned, I don't think it will change. Since this root of our suffering will not change, neither will its antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness. As far as the view of emptiness is concerned, it remains relevant at the beginning, the middle, and the end of our practice, in all historical periods, in all places, and for all sentient beings. When adopting new cultural forms, we must ensure that we neither intentionally nor inadvertently discard or change vital teachings. Should that happen, the liberation and awakening of future generations would be rendered impossible. Thoughtfulness, care, and slow change are preferable to a rush to make Buddhism more attractive to the present public. So, go slowly, think about it. Don't throw the Buddha out with the bathwater. And this is something quite important because sometimes in the West, it does feel like there's a rush to, we've got to change everything because there's just too much cultural baggage, there's too much myth. We have to strip Buddhism from all of this and, make it Western. But, if you haven't studied a lot, if you don't have a deep feeling and, some realizations, it's difficult. Like people ask regarding the deities, can we change what the deities look like? Yeah, visualizing Chenrezig with 1,000 heads is really hard. Can we visualize him with fewer heads? Yeah, I don't. I can't relate to Chenrezig who's white. I want to be, a black Chenrezig. Or Tara's green, and I don't like, thinking of myself as green. Can I visualize myself as the color my body is, but in the form of Tara? People ask these kinds of questions. I'm not joking. Yeah. And then we have, the lamas always say, no, visualize the way that, they're portrayed, because these are things that the Buddha taught, and these are the forms that the great cities saw the deities in. Yeah, so don't kind of go around painting your own deities. Yeah, which could be tempting, you know? Yeah, like, well, wouldn't it be easier, you know, you have a deity and he's wearing a suit? There's generosity. Yeah, wearing a suit. Yeah. Yeah.
Back here, up a few paragraphs from where we finished, it says, I lost it. Some of the views expressed by earlier Tibetan Buddhists are held by people today. What are those views by earlier Tibetan Buddhists that we're referring to here?
Okay. Some of the earlier Tibetans, they thought that emptiness was inherently existent, that it had to be inherently existent because it was the ultimate nature of reality, so it had to exist independent. Others of them thought that because when you search for something with ultimate analysis and you don't find it, that therefore emptiness was not an object of knowledge, wasn't a knowable object. Okay, so those were two of them.
And those views don't exist in Tibetan Buddhism anymore.
I can't say that they don't exist anymore. There may be a few people here and there who, you know, I mean, to make a grandiose statement like that is difficult. Okay, but a lot of time was spent refuting those ideas. And they might still exist because, yeah, they were there for a few centuries.
So someone online is asking about, there's a center that only teaches the Pali teachings, but they claim that they're non-sectarian. And they invited a Tibetan monk, but then they decided to decline the invitation because it didn't align with their teaching, yet they still say that they're non-sectarian. And this person wants to know, is that true or what's going on?
You know, I can't talk about an individual center and its policies when I don't know the people and I don't know the center. So I'm afraid I can't really answer that question. Oh, also I want to say to the Singaporeans online that I know you're doing some extra practice today in preparation for Vesak, so that's very good. We're glad they're doing prostrations, 35 Buddhas and the Buddha meditation. So thank you very much for creating merit. We wish you all a happy Vesak. And we'll celebrate Vesak again in another month.